Hey guys, Alex from Board Game Co. over here, and it's time for a May collection update. These are the games that are leaving my collection in May, shockingly enough, and I always start these months off by wondering, will I actually have enough games that are leaving the collection to do a video? And sure enough, month over month I continue to have those, but every month it starts off and it's like, oh boy, what am I going to have to do? Am I going to have to skip June? Am I going to play a bunch of games that are new and like them all? What am I going to do? Or am I going to have to crawl through my shelves intentionally finding things to cut and get rid of just so I can do one of these videos, which I might actually do that sometime. It's not the worst idea, and honestly, if I can get rid of a game just to do a video, then I probably shouldn't have been owning it in the first place. And anyway, starting this off, we have the easy cheat, which is Charterstone. Charterstone is a bit of a cheat because it's not really a game that's leaving the collection in a typical sense. Rather, we finished the Legacy game, we enjoyed it. I would say Charterstone is a Legacy game from Stonemaier Games, if you haven't heard of it yet. It's very reminiscent of Rise of Queensdale, which is a terrible comparison to make because far more people know about Charterstone than Rise of Queensdale. But both of them have that basic worker placement, tableau building your little area of a village that you're cultivating. Both have this aspect of a king that's kind of delegating tasks to the different players to build up an area. They both are thematically the same and share different common gameplay elements. Ultimately, I would say this was not my least favorite Legacy game. It was definitely, I think my least favorite Legacy game so far was Aeon's End Legacy, but it is a step up from that, and when I say least favorite, don't get me wrong, I still totally enjoyed it, and I anticipate playing this again one day, maybe in 2 years when my daughter's a bit older. Right now I think this is a drop out of her reach complexity-wise, but in another year or two this would be right up her alley, and she already loved the art, the people, she wanted to name everyone. It got a very cutesy, cartoonish look. Great game, just getting rid of it because we finally finished it. From there we have Tiny Epic Defenders, both the expansion and the base game, as well as Tiny Epic Galaxies. Whoops, I'm going to drop these guys. Tiny Epic Galaxies and Tiny Epic Defenders. This continues my trend of kind of liking but not loving the Tiny Epic series. I have now played Tiny Epic Quest, Tiny Epic Defenders, Tiny Epic Galaxies. I feel there's one I'm missing. I didn't play Epic Kingdoms. I might be missing one. I don't remember. But anyways, I have Tiny Epic Tactics on my shelf. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, I've enjoyed these. I played Tiny Epic Galaxies a few times. Played Tiny Epic Defenders a few more times. Both of them are good. Both of them are fine. I don't know what it is about the series. With both these as well as Tiny Epic Quest, I continuously felt like that something about the game was lacking. Now, what I mean by that is I couldn't really purely define what it is. Gameplay-wise, it's totally fine. I don't know if it's because of the limited shelf space they're using in terms of trying to condense everything into that box. Maybe it just literally didn't feel epic enough because everything was small and tiny. I think I was more concerned with gameplay as opposed to components, but overall, I mean, I love Sprawlopolis and Circle the Wagons, and those are just a bunch of cards. Ultimately, these games are enjoyable. I'm always happy to play them, but I have yet to love any of the games in that series. Don't get me wrong, there's a whole bunch more still to try, but I think so far, Tiny Epic Galaxies I think is the highest rated one in the series, and it still kind of felt just okay to me. Again, totally okay, totally fine, happy to give it a shot, just not something I feel the need to keep, and so these guys are moving on for right now. And Tiny Epic Defenders, I played that one only solo for what it's worth in terms of opinions. I only played it solo, played it a bunch of times. It was continuously fun. There's just other puzzle games I would just rather play. I'd rather play anything in the Oniverse. I'd rather play Marvel Champions. I'd rather play Friday. There are a bunch of other different solo games that I feel fill that spot, but better. Next up we have Medieval Academy, and I think this is one of two on this list that I haven't even played. Medieval Academy is a game that I got because I heard it's a drafting game and it looks like it's fun, cutesy artwork, fun, whatever. And then I read the rules, and after reading the rules, I looked at more reviews after the fact, because the reviews I finished the rules and I was like, that's it? You're just drafting numbers? You're not, there's no abilities, there's no nothing, there's just higher and lower numbers? I mean, what's the tenseness? Where's that? I love drafting as a mechanic because it makes you sweat. It makes you sit there and say, not only do I have to make an incredibly complicated, difficult decision about what card I want for myself, but also what cards I'm passing to my opponent. In fact, Isle of Cats, which is a game I love. I do love Isle of Cats, don't get me wrong. My biggest critique against Isle of Cats is it gave drafting to the players, and yet most of the time I don't feel that there's that tenseness in drafting. I very rarely felt like what I was doing was really an incredibly hard choices to which cards to take. It usually kind of felt like, oh, here's 3 good cards, I can only take 2 of them, fine, that's simple enough. Contrast that with Seven Wonders, where I want every card. Contrast that with Bunny Kingdom, where I want every card from 15 cards in my hand. Contrast that with Blood Rage, where I want every card. Or Terraforming Mars, where I want every card. I want a drafting game to make me want every single card and to feel the pain as I pass them on to the left or to the right or whatever. In Medieval Academy, it's mostly high numbers, and then obviously it's a question of the track you want, but it's not like all cards are created equal. It's very much not so. So I looked up some reviews after the fact, after getting it, after reading the rules, and it kind of seemed like a lot of people kind of agree that it was more of an intro to drafting. It had good concepts, had good mechanics, but wasn't great. And I decided I have too many unplayed games as of, I think I have 68 games currently unplayed, and I'm locking it down to 67 by getting rid of Medieval Academy. From there we get rid of Clans, which is a game that I have gotten rid of, gotten back, and I'm getting rid of again. Clans is a very interesting game. I overall think Clans is a good game. I overall think, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Clans has an element of something hidden in the game. Basically, you have these various huts. I don't know. You have these huts. You're moving around different territories, and as you move the huts, you're creating these gaps in the board where you're trying to basically score segments of huts on their own. And the whole game comes down to your color is secret. What you are doing in terms of your color, your player color, is secret information. And if you keep that information secret, you can kind of navigate to a better board state where people can't block you. And because constantly, if someone else knows your color, they can more easily stop you from accomplishing your objectives and getting the most points. So you kind of go through this whole game with a secret color. People start kind of trying to guess which color you are. You get to the end and you see who wins. The reason I don't keep it, the reason I like it while also it doesn't see the table, and this is why I'm eventually getting rid of it, is because it kind of has this hybrid aspect to it where the secrecy almost feels like something they threw on the game, but it doesn't usually work except if you toe that perfect line. Meaning, if you are just not obvious enough about your color, if you take multiple moves that aren't in your best interest, then ultimately you will lose because you just didn't get the points. Congratulations, no one knows what color you are, and that's because your color's in last place because you're not going for points. You're going for secrecy over points. Versus if you're too subtle, if you're too obvious about it, then again it's kind of just devolves into this, why is there even secrecy in the game? There's this kind of perfect middle spot where you're mostly obvious about your color, but you leave just enough room to the imagination that maybe late game you can kind of get in enough extra points to be worth the points you sacrificed. Consistently throughout this game, you have to make choices that either are or aren't in your best interest, and every time you don't act in your best interest, you preserve the veil of secrecy while giving up points. So you have to find those moments where you can kind of blend and give up as few points as possible in the hopes of a perfect return. It's an intriguing concept, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy. The reason I have it for now, I've had it in my collection for like 5-6 years now, the reason it stayed around this long and the reason I got it back is because towing that line sometimes feels like a challenge in and of itself. The problem is, when you're playing it with that line in mind, with that exact degree of what you want secret versus public, it's hard to really just pull out with a bunch of people who haven't played it before. So it's a game that if I was playing it with the same people again and again, it would probably stay around, but as it is, I don't feel the need to own Clans anymore for right now. Next up, second game on this list we have not played is Champions of Hara. Champions of Hara I've had for maybe half a year, maybe a little more now, and I got it because I saw some overall positive things. It was intriguing, it looked cool. Figured I'll get it, why not? I can be impulsive that way. And when I got it, after I got it, and keep in mind, one of the reasons I'm impulsive that way, just to be clear, is because I have this ability to trade in games. Because of the fact that I don't just let a game sit on my shelf unplayed forever. Because of the fact that I'm happy to get a game and get rid of it if it doesn't suit my needs or whatever, I'm a little bit more willing to acquire games. I don't want to spend 4 hours researching a game when I can instead get it and just get rid of it. And I lose a little bit on the churn aspect of it. But I'm willing to, because of the fact that I view my games as not games that stay on the shelf, that's why I'm more flexible about getting games without doing tons of research. But anyways, Champions of Hara did look good. I did appreciate what I saw about it. And then I started reading through the rulebook, and the rulebook felt like more of a slog than I wanted. And so I looked into it more, and the reviews are mixed. It's kind of seemed like a lot of people were comparing it to Mage Knight, which is interesting because I would not have gotten that just from what I saw previously, but there were aspects of it that are similar to Mage Knight, that exploration system where you level up your character and you're going through different, a different map exploration and trying to figure out the optimalness of whatever's. there were too many negative reviews of it, and I already love Mage Knight, meaning there were a lot of positive reviews, don't get me wrong, a lot of people who did seem to enjoy the game, but there were enough people that were on the fence about it, and the fact that the people who loved it the most were comparing it to Mage Knight, which I already love, and the fact that the rulebook was a slog, and those 68 unplayed games, I eventually decided, you know what, maybe I'll get it back in a few years, but for right now, I think I'm going to have to pass on it. Next up, we have Sierra West. Sierra West is one that I am afraid I have to be fairly critical of. Fairly critical of. I think on this list, yeah, this is the one I have the lowest opinion of so far. Now, I generally like games. Usually when I get rid of games, it's not because they were bad, it's because other games were better. Everything on this list so far that has gone away, and everything else on this list is not a bad game, it's just that other games are better and I have limited time. Sierra West is a game that, in the complete absence of other games, it's still not bad. But it's definitely a game that I did not feel was in any way. One of the things I constantly say, to give you context, one of the things I constantly say is I'm always happy to play that. If you want to play whatever, Tiny Epic King Defenders with me, I'm happy to play it. I just don't feel the need to own it. Sierra West I would probably turn down, almost certainly. Sierra West is an interesting game with an interesting mechanic that basically has these cards. I don't know how well you'll be able to see. You can't see much there, but you have this tower of cards that you're trying to slowly acquire. It has an element of deck building, and the cards have these little icons in the bottom that involve building a trail for your various workers to move along. The way I would put this game, without going too much into it, the way I would put this game, and the reason why I really don't like it, is it's not that it's bad, it's that the complexity to depth ratio is terrible. Absolutely terrible. The game's not bad. The complexity to depth ratio is terrible. What I mean by that is when you have a game that has a lot of depth and a few rules, like the classic a minute to learn, a lifetime to master, great, easy. Teach someone the game in a few minutes and then play it and, you know, tons of depth. If you have a game with not as much depth, but it teaches pretty quickly, again, that's fine. You want to play Ticket to Ride? I can teach Ticket to Ride to someone in 5-6 minutes, and it's not the heaviest, deepest game, but the depth to complexity ratio is there. Sierra West has a ton of complexity, not a ton, it's no food chain magnet, but it has a decent amount of complexity to the rules, to the sequencing, to how the game works, and the actual payout in terms of the depth of the game is terrible. Absolutely terrible. It's, again, the depth is not bad, but the depth is equivalent to maybe Carcassonne, Ticket to Ride, or whatever. And by the way, if you think there's a ton of depth to those games, don't take my opinion as a counter to them. Sometimes I just play those games lighter, so that is what it is. But anyways, it has the depth of a lighter game, and it has the complexity of a heavier game, and it has possibly the worst ratio of the two that I can personally recall from the games I've played. It was totally unrewarding to go through the sequencing of rules, to learn the game, to figure out how to play the game, and then to start realizing as you played that there were so few meaningful decisions to be made. There are people who like this game, so as always, take my opinions with a healthy grain of salt. This is not a poorly rated game by any means. It's rated, I believe, it's a 7.1 or something like that on Board Game Geek. That is totally fine. I have games that are far less than that on my shelves that I thoroughly enjoy. Look at the reviews, see if it kind of appeals to you, see what the people who love it. There are multiple people who rated it a 10. Multiple people who love this game. I sadly am not one of those people, specifically because of that complexity to depth ratio that I'm talking about. Specifically because it felt like there were a lot of intricate rules going on and very little decision making to actually be made. Next up on this list, we have Hara Medieval Age by Matt Leacock. This is one that is basically the successor to Roll Through the Ages, I think. Roll Through the Ages, I think that's what it's called. Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, I think there's two. But anyways, Roll Through the Ages is a game that I played a long time ago. This is a roll and writes before roll and writes were popular, and Roll Through the Ages was a great game. It really was. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of those games I actually debate whether to get it back again, and because of I like that game so much, Hara Medieval Age was an easy, like, oh, I want to try this out. Let's get it. Let's see if it's good, because it's supposed to be the next level up in that series. It takes the core elements of that game and makes it a better world building experience. Sadly, it takes the core elements of that game and makes it a worse world building experience. It's not bad, again, by any means. This is not a bad game, but going back to the complexity to depth ratio, the complexity to depth ratio in this game is not great. Not nearly as bad as Sierra West, at least not my own opinion, but it added a lot of complexity to Roll Through the Ages without adding a lot of depth. There's a lot more things happening, a lot more fiddliness, a lot more clutter on the board. It has an element of polyominousness, but not really. And it doesn't really work for me. It wasn't bad. Again, it was not bad. I would happily play this again. But certainly not one that I am in a rush to pull off the shelf myself. Finally, we have It's a Wonderful World. And this is the only one on this list that I really strongly debated keeping. And I'm still torn, and it's possible when the expansion comes out, it's possible I'll eventually reacquire it. It had a lot of things that I liked about it, but not enough when compared to other drafting games that I like. So It's a Wonderful World, like I just said, is a drafting game. It's a game where you go through 4 rounds of picking cards, and it has a very innovative mechanic that I thoroughly appreciated, which is within each round you're drafting cards, but there's also a sequence in each round in which you can play cards in certain orders that will then increase the production of parts of that production round. I'm explaining it terribly because you kind of have to see it to really play it out, but I guess you could see it. You have these production rounds as you play cards. What you're going to do is you're going to see. I'm probably explaining this terribly again. Ultimately, there's 4 rounds to the game, but there's a sequence to each round that enables you to layer your cards off one another so that you're benefiting cards even in the same round. Very well done, very interesting mechanic, very appealing. The problem is the rest of the game felt dry to me. It didn't have the level of tenseness I like in a drafting game. It wasn't bad, but certainly not the level of tenseness. And everything in the game is so abstracted as to be pretty much meaningless. Now, the closest comparison to this is Seven Wonders. And Seven Wonders, yes, of course, is abstracted, but at least when you have military, it feels like military. At least when you have science, it feels like science. These things actually feel like there's something. In It's a Wonderful World, they have colors to the cubes, and they have thematic military, banking, production, whatever, but none of it feels like that at all. It just feels like colored cubes. And the cards themselves, because they all do the same thing in minor sub-variations of each other, because it's far fewer abilities than Seven Wonders, it didn't feel as tense when you're drafting them. It felt like, well, if I don't get this card, I'll get another card that earns me cubes. It wasn't a question of, ooh, do I want this marketplace card that will help me get 4 coins that will enable me to do this, and do I want this production that I can use the other things? It really just felt like, well, if I don't get the card I want now, I'll get the card next round, and it will still give me cubes. And it's not the cubes I ideally want, but it'll work, kind of. It is a good game, don't get me wrong. Again, from all these games, this is the one that I really strongly debated giving it a few more tries, seeing if after maybe games 5, 6, it really picks up. I don't know. Ultimately, after a few plays, for right now, it is not a game I'm keeping, but it is one that I do recommend trying out. It's very pretty, very beautifully done, great production value, easy to explain, overall a good game, but for me, Seven Wonders takes the cake. That's basically it. Those are, the games from May that are not sticking around. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we'll see what happens in June. Maybe June I will start pulling random games off the shelf to make you all happy with the games I'm getting rid of. In any case, I'm Alex from Board Game Co. You can subscribe down below if you like seeing more of this stuff. If you can like, comment, tell me which of these games I am crazy for getting rid of. Specifically Sierra West. Do you like Sierra West and why? I think that the last few times I really dished on a game, it was a game that was more highly rated, which makes it easier in a way, because of the fact that I know so many people love a game, I take my own review with less seriousness, because hey, if a game's rated an 8, people love it. Take my own opinion with a grain of salt. When a game's already a 7, I already feel a little more worse about it, because it's not as universally loved, which gives my beating, I guess, more, I don't know. Either way, hope I'm explaining myself correctly. Until next time, I'm Alex. Have a good one.